Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be the only one from the U.S. here. Thank you for inviting me. So, how did I get interested in entomology and microorganisms? From a very little girl, I wanted to do this. And why? Because my father actually used the first ever commercialized biopesticide from Bacillus thuringiensis. At the place where I grew up in Connecticut, in the house that my father built in a beautiful place, I learned all about the insects, and he had this problem with spongy moths killing his trees, and there was a beautiful cornice dogwood tree outside the kitchen window he was trying to save, and he took BT and used it and made my mother happy because it was good for the environment, but he wasn't sure that it worked. And so that was important to find products that actually can work. So I was involved in the microbiome way before it was trendy, and this is more than 30 years ago. I started my career at Monsanto Company. I was hired to start up a unit looking for new ways to control pests, and we decided to start a microbial natural product screening program way back in 1983. So it's a long time ago. We were way ahead of our time, and we screened and did a robotics, the first ever robotic screening, and screened over 150,000 microbes. Monsanto cut that program and eliminated it and decided to go into genetically modified crops. Maybe you think that was good for them because they are very successful, had become very successful in GMOs. But I fell in love with microbes. And then Novo Nordisk, a very small company at the time, called me and said, "We want you to start up a company looking for microbes to control pests and plant pathogens." So I moved to Davis, California from St. Louis, and we screened another 55,000 microbes. They sold us to our largest competitor, now Valent Biosciences, because they had some issues in their other businesses. So then I started up AgroQuest, and we screened another 32,000 microbes and discovered Serenade, which is now the biggest biofungicide sold by Bayer. And the company was taken over. I was taking the company on the stock market right around 9/11, 2001, unfortunately. Bad timing. So the company was taken over by an investor, and I left and started up Marrone Bioinnovations, and we screened more microbes, 18,000, developed a whole line of products. And then I did take that company on the stock market, but it was sold in 2022 to Bioceres Crop Solutions. I was not allowed to start up another company under a non-compete agreement until that expired in 23. So then I started up the Invasive Species Corporation. Now, in 2024, we screened about 2,000 microbes, and we have enough discoveries for many products. And I'll explain why, as the time has gone on, we've become much more efficient at finding these things. But as you know, the world needs our green technology, and I'm so happy to see what you're doing in green microbes, green ag, because as you know, our soil is degraded. We still use a lot of pesticides, but still have a lot of crop damage. And agriculture and food production is responsible for 15% of all greenhouse gas emissions. So we have big problems still to solve. The 3 different categories of biologicals are all growing at double digits, growing very quickly, and far outpacing the growth of chemicals, chemical fertilizers or chemical pesticides, which are flat, not growing at all. So we have the 3 categories. They're called biopesticides or bioprotection or biocontrol. And then we have the biostimulants, which reduce crop stress and increase crop growth. And then we have the bionutrients. Brazil has become the largest pesticide market for chemicals, but also the largest biologicals market. Why is it now the biggest? They had a serious problem with pest resistance to pesticides, chemicals. And the pesticides were not working anymore. And so the farmers needed new solutions. They tried biologicals. The biologicals, they didn't work very well for them. Why? Because they didn't know how to use them. So the government of Brazil set up extension, so outreach to farmers in each state, and taught them how to use the biologicals. Now they're very successful, and they're used on very large acre crops. While in the rest of the world, most biologicals are used on high-value fruits and vegetables, whereas in Brazil, they're used on corn and cotton and soybeans and sugarcane. So a very big success story. The market is doubling every 3 years. Also, it's very important, they have an extremely fast regulatory system. You can get a biopesticide through Brazil in 13 months. It's the fastest in the world. The U.S. used to be the fastest in the world, not anymore. We don't, that's another story. It's a great place to be now. If you do the math, by 2040 or so, biologicals market will be as big as chemicals. So that's why you should care about biologicals, because the growth is double digit compared to single digit. They're going to cross over. My mother is almost 99 years old, so I think I will live to see this happen, and it will be a very exciting day. Why are they growing? We have the typical reasons. They don't leave any pesticide residues. Pests and pathogens don't generally develop resistance to the complex modes of action of biologicals, so they're great for resistance management. They can enhance the farm biodiversity, preserve pollinators, are safe to people. But more recently, now we know that biologicals can enhance the farmer's soil health. You can apply products and then characterize the microbiome after application of biologicals and show positive shifts in the soil health. And now we have the sequencing tools to be able to prove that. I had the first study in the industry several years ago that proved that we could reduce greenhouse gas emissions compared to chemicals. At Marrone Bio, we showed 3 of our biological products, 1 plant extract and 2 microbials, compared to 3 chemical pesticides could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 80 to 90%. Now, there's lots more studies, but we had the first one. And of course, the biggest driver is that farmers see the advantages. When biologicals are properly incorporated, and they understand how to use biologicals, they get a higher return on investment than chemical-only programs. And lastly, we heard this morning, we have so many new tools that we can use to characterize microorganisms and make biologicals better, precision fermentation, synthetic biology, and other tools that the products are getting better and better. The big companies, of course, know this now and have jumped in, and all of the big companies have purchased or acquired other smaller biological companies. Most recently, Syngenta acquired Intrinsic Bio. And Intrinsic is a company in the United States that has products for nutrient uptake, better nutritional uptake by the plant, microbes that are endophytes. So that's the latest purchase. And all of the big companies are looking for more acquisitions, especially because Europe has targets for reducing chemical fertilizer. So everyone needs some alternative solutions. The investment in ag biotechnology has been very, very good. So this has funded a lot of new startup companies. Now you can see that there was a very big peak in 2021. That has come down now, but there's still quite a lot of money that's going into new startups for biologicals and ag biotech. Not just biologicals, but also gene-edited plants as well as GMO plants. So it's a good time. It's tough now raising money, but it's still a good time to be an entrepreneur because there's still money out there. But it's very crowded. This is a map that I helped put together in 2023 showing the companies, biological companies around the globe. We gave up in exhaustion because there were so many companies. We stopped at 1,400 companies, and we didn't capture even all of the companies in the world. So it's extremely crowded, especially in the biostimulant area and biofertilizer area, because it's much easier to start up a biofertilizer or biostimulant company than a biopesticide company, which is more heavily regulated. So my message is, it's good to be in this business, but you'd better be differentiated, okay? So you'd better have products that offer the growers something unique and different than other companies have in the market, or you're not going to be successful commercially. So I was very pleased to hear, I visited Dr. Ru's lab. He was a very good host, and I was really pleased to visit with him. And he's working on a project for reducing methane emissions in rice with microbes. And I think that's an example of an unmet need in the market where it's something differentiated and different than others have. So keep that in mind if you're developing new products. If you're developing a new chemical, in US dollars it costs about $300 million and 12 years to get a new chemical pesticide to market. It's a huge amount of money. A biological pesticide you can bring to market 4 years or less. I can bring a product 4 years or less for $4 million. So it's much less capital. And we can develop and launch the first version 1.0 product with growers who are early adopters and see a need for the products. So a very different business model, chemical pesticides versus biological. So it's important to keep in mind that startup companies and young companies who develop biologicals have a very different business model. When they get to market, maybe they'll only have 50 field trials instead of thousands of field trials like the chemical companies do. So this is something, it's important to remember this, but growers like their early adopter growers, those innovative growers who like new technology and will grab the version 1.0 biological if it's something they feel can be filling an unmet need on their farm. Now, talking about some examples of things that I've developed. I've developed many, many, many products. These are 3 successful products. The first one is Serenade. You may have heard of it. It was commercialized in Korea. Bayer now owns this, was sold to Bayer. And we discovered this microbe from a peach orchard in California, where the grower reported to us that he didn't have much monolinea or brown rot. So he was wondering why his trees were so much cleaner than his neighbors. So we isolated, took many samples from there and found Serenade, the bacteria. It's not really a Bacillus subtilis. We didn't have gene sequencing back then, so it's really an MLO liquefaciens. And so we had launched in 1998, a long time ago, version 1.0. But Bayer is now still selling between $100 and $200 million worth of Serenade, and they're expanding the plant that I had, the manufacturing facility in Mexico that I had bought, and they're expanding it to make more Serenade because they have version now 5.0, which is a new version used for potatoes to improve potato quality, the quality of potatoes. At Marrone Bioinnovations, note that Serenade was discovered after testing 713 microbes. It didn't take 30,000 microbes. It took only 713 microbes. Now, for Burkholderia rhinogensis, or venerate, now called several different brand names, new species found near a temple, the rhinogen temple, microbe number 396. So again, we very quickly found this product, new species. And it is an insecticide and nematicide, and it's used on about 10 million hectares in the United States as a seed treatment. And this new version has increased the metabolites, insecticidal, nematicidal metabolites, by about 150-fold in fermentation. So the use rate can go down from about, 4 liters per hectare down to just a few grams. The third one, which I'm working on, I spun out, took this product from Marrone Bio, and now we're furthering it and developing version 2.0. This is a Pseudomonas fluorescens, now actually called protogens in the new taxonomy of it, was found by scientists in New York from a river that was infested with an invasive mollusk or mussel. The zebra and quagga mussels came from Europe and invaded North America and are causing horrible damage to power facilities and lakes and rivers. So this particular microbe produces FIT-D protein in its cells. The FIT-D binds to the gut of the mollusk, the mussel, and stops them from feeding, and they die. This works as well as chemicals and copper, the standard chemicals, but it is a tricky microbe to preserve because it's gram-negative. And so we are working on a better formulation and better improved fermentation of it, but we are selling some right now. So here you go, a microbe that is specific only to 2 species of invasive mollusks. Amazing what microbes can do. So back at it, at Invasive Species Corporation, we set up the microbial screening again. This time, we didn't have to screen very many microbes, but we still went out to nature, to where the pests live, to find the microbes and isolate the microbes from where the pests and the target pests are. But then the scientists did a 16S sequence first. We do the full gene sequence after we know it has activity. But we did the 16S, and then the scientists used data mining, you could call them machine learning or AI tools, data mining tools, genome mining tools, to pick and select which microbes to test. So they were much more efficient at testing. Go back. Okay. Sorry. So much more efficient testing with this approach than we were in the past. So after we have tested against the target pest, we are now using the full gene sequence of each active microbe to determine the metabolites, and then mine the. We have a bioinformatic person we've hired to help us with the data mining of the genomes to determine which metabolites. So we'll be much faster at finding which metabolites they're making, so we can then develop the fermentation based on those metabolites. And so things are a lot more efficient in the development of the product today than it was in the past. And of course, we have to send the microbe to toxicology testing and doing all the things, the tox tests that are required for the regulatory agencies to make sure that it is safe. At Marrone Bio, we tested weeds and algae, toxic algae. Oh, sorry. And we had a very low hit rate. So of the percentage of microbes that were active was only 1.5% for herbicide and less than 1% for algicide. At current company, using this more data mining approach, we have more than 30% active from hits in the herbicide and over 16% for the algae. We also have this project that is quite bizarre. The state of Washington in the United States asked us to find a solution to control invasive burrowing shrimp destroying their oyster beds in Washington state. And they wanted us to find a microorganism producing natural products that can do this, because the restaurants, the chefs, would not buy any oysters treated with chemicals. So we said, oh my God, are there microbes that can kill crustaceans like shrimp? Indeed. If you look at the literature, there's plenty of reports that show that microbes can kill crustaceans. So we, not this species, but so we set up went to where the shrimp lived, and where the oyster growers said the shrimp had died out, collected samples, and in 7 months, we had microbes killing those shrimp. Amazingly fast by using this data mining or genomics mining, genome mining techniques. Also, the shrimp have chitin. These shrimp have no meat on them. This is not like commercial shrimp. They're this tube and then big, huge shells. And the scientists put chitin in the plate and looked for microbes that were producing chitinases. It's one of the tests we did. But so we have some microbes that were chitinase produced and others that had nothing to do with it. Now they're being tested on the rats. So we're also testing the same microbes against sea lice of salmon, which is a crustacean that parasitic to salmon. So why not? We'll see, because needs a new solution for that as well. So we've found plenty of candidates for controlling weeds, and now we're looking to pick some for development to the next stage. So that's us, but let me talk about what else is going on in the industry. There are a lot of companies that are focusing on finding new microbes for nitrogen fixation, for sequestering carbon, for reducing crop stress, and drought water tolerance and drought efficiency, and then controlling pests and pathogens that are still needed. So there's a number of companies doing that around the globe. There's also a new group of companies that are genetically engineering microbes. So Robigo is actually engineering, they're doing engineering double-stranded RNA, actually, into root colonizing microbes to control root diseases. Pivot Bio is gene-edited a microbe to produce nitrogen fixation. So is Bioconsortia. Switch Bioworks is actually engineered microbe versus gene editing for nitrogen fixation. And there's a few companies working on microbial metabolites. And then a number of companies that are converting manure or waste streams like nut shells or supermarket waste, food waste, with microbes converting, or enzymes converting and making biofertilizers that can regenerate the soil for regenerative agriculture. What some of these companies are showing is that it'll take about 5 to 7 years to go from a conventional farm to a regenerative farm where your soil is transformed. But if you add some of these biofertilizers, you can shorten the time to 2 to 3 years, so that's a real advantage for the farmer. Now, we're talking about microbes. This is a microbe conference, but I thought I would also mention some of the things going on in the plant or other types of microbes. There are companies like La Safra and Lalamon that are extracting from yeast, not the living yeast themselves, but yeast extracts for plant disease control. There's Botanical Solutions from Chile, and they also have an office in Davis that is using bioreactors to make plant-based compounds for disease control and other uses. Illicit Plant is spraying plant-based sterols on crops to reduce water stress. Agrospheres is encapsulating double-stranded RNA for RNA interference products in their bacillus micelle encapsulation technology. Sound Agriculture is making strigolactone chemistry. These are signaling compounds that attract microbes to the plant. They have nature-identical synthetic compounds that they're applying to the soil to attract microbes to the root and increase crop growth. And they're doing very well with it. And then there's some other plant immunity boosting enzymes and compounds, and also True Algae is taking the water from indoor algae production, and there's metabolites and hormones in the water that is a plant stimulant. So some interesting things going on. Pheromones for mating disruption, is having a whole renaissance. There's new technology. For example, BioPhero was purchased for a lot of money by FMC, big chemical company, and they're making pheromones in fermentation. So that's a new way to make them versus synthetic. M2I, Provivi, and Semios have a more efficient synthetic way to make the mating disruption. And Pheronym, company I advise in Davis, has discovered some pheromones that change the behavior of soil-dwelling pests. Two big areas you heard this morning. One of our speakers was very high on peptides, as am I, because you can use machine learning, AI and machine learning to develop better peptides. So there's a lot of companies now that are focused on insecticidal, nematicidal, and fungicidal, and even, and fungicidal peptides. There's some of them showing you on the slide here. And then RNAi, so RNA interference, I've already mentioned it a couple times. There's a number of companies. I mean, essentially you can find an RNAi solution for any pest, pathogen, or weed. And Greenlight, which has commercialized the first ever insecticidal double-stranded RNA product, has announced that they have now successfully are killing the worst weed, pigweed. And so these are two technologies that I think, two categories that you'll see will become dominant once the formulation and delivery technology gets worked out. So because they're not always stable, there needs to be some better ways to encapsulate and formulate them, but that is coming. Greenlight already has the manufacturing cost way down. So how does somebody sort through so many innovations? Well, farmers are asked this all the time. I get so many companies coming to me on the farm with their stuff. And how do I know? Well, first of all, what field data, what efficacy data does the company have, and what does it show? The bar is much higher than it was in the past. So if you have a product that is giving a farmer a 3 to 5% yield increase, that's really ho-hum average. You really have to be 10% higher or higher, and you have to have a consistent product. So the demands now for the marketplace is that you need 90% win rate. That means 90% of the time your product better show consistent yield increases. So it's getting tougher to be a biological company coming to market. You can't have something ordinary, as I've said. And so farmers are looking for something that's going to really stand out. And it's really important to show that in real on-farm demos, not just small plots, because small plots are not always representative of what biologicals can do. And that's a big mistake that sometimes are made in developing biologicals, that researchers will just do tiny little plots and say, oh, it doesn't work as well as chemicals. Well, that's not a good enough way to test biologicals. They really have to be integrated into programs on the farm to really determine how well they work. And you know how many entrepreneurs or companies tell me, I say, how does your product work? And they say, I can't tell you, it's proprietary. I said, what? I mean, please. If you can't tell a farmer or anyone how your product works scientifically, then forget it. You're not going to be a successful commercial company. The farmers want to know how the product works and what it does and how it's different from others. When do you apply it? How much water do you use? What is the stage of the crop when you apply it? What does it do? And all these details. So one of the things that's totally missing from the market are bioherbicides. It's the biggest category because 40% of the global pesticide use are herbicides. And there's a huge need for herbicides. But it's very, very technically challenging to find microorganisms, biological technology that can compete with very low cost, cheap, generic chemical pesticides. So there's just not a lot of companies doing it. So there's just a handful of companies. There may be some more here that I don't know about, but it's so because of the technical challenges, it's not many companies. So there's different microbes, AFIA, Kuvu, my company, ProFarm, Micro, MGX. They have those, MOA are working on microbes, different things with microbes. And then you have peptides with MicroPep, and Weed Out, which is using actually sterile pollen, and HARP, which is using mint extracts. So you've got a handful of things, but nothing on the coming on the market anytime soon. So we've got to wait a few years to see how this will shake out. There's an article in Chemical and Engineering News about bioherbicides, and there is hope that all the new technologies, whether it's novel compounds and using AI and machine learning and synthetic biology to move genes from one microbe to another to increase production and get the cost down, and then combining biologicals with robots and new spray technology like See and Spray, which will deliver much smaller volumes to the weed. And then if you have a very expensive fermentation or more expensive fermentation product and it delivers a lot less of it, then maybe it can be economical for the grower. So I'm very optimistic about this bioherbicide area. But I would have to say that there's a lot of skepticism that anyone is going to be able to find something that can compete with chemicals. But I've always said I will not retire until I find a good herbicide. So I'm sticking to it. All right. So what do farmers think about these things? So anywhere you go in the globe, this is U.S. data, but it doesn't matter. I've talked to farmers all over the world, and it's the same. Okay, 35% say, I see some potential. 41% say, I need to know more before using. And 21%, I don't know. I don't have a clue, okay? Only 4% say, I see no benefit. So what this is telling you, and this is farmers from wherever you are in the globe, they don't know enough about biologicals and are not trained or educated enough to know how to use them. That is our problem, and we need to solve that. You can have all the best technology in the world, but if you can't get the farmer to understand how to use them, then they're not going to use them. So what do they want from a biological? Number one, yield boost. That's not surprising. And what don't they like about biologicals? Cost. Okay, well, because sometimes chemicals can be applied once every 3 weeks, whereas you have to reapply a biological more often because of their but their biodegradability. So, cost, but I think with the new tools we have and better fermentation and other tools, we could get the cost down. So these are farmers who have never used biologicals, and what do they say about them? Not proven. I don't know enough about them. Again, okay, so it's very similar to the other survey I showed you. So, but here are some things. Okay, I used a biological 5 years ago, and it didn't work. And then they never tried it again. I hear that a lot. And I'll say, wait a minute. 5 years is a long time. I have 2 more versions of the product with new formulations. Oh yeah, Pam, you always say that. No, you really have to try the new versions because there's a rapid improvement of the products over time. The chemical didn't work, so I thought I'd try your biological. This is what happened in Brazil, where nothing worked, so they just grabbed the biological. I hear this from farmers all the time. And they have resistance or what have you, and an outbreak. And this is not the best time to try biological. Sometimes only just for organic farming, but that's 75% of all biologicals are used by conventional farmers who use chemicals. So it's not just for organic. And then a lot of times the reports you'll see from researchers are really unfair to biologicals because they'll report that the biological didn't separate from the untreated, but neither did the chemical. I don't know how many trials, I've done thousands and thousands of trials in my career, and many, many times. The commercial blockbuster chemical selling $1 billion worth of product doesn't separate from the untreated in the field trial. Okay, so why would you expect differently from the biologicals? So sometimes the way the reports are written is not fair, so it's really important to give them a fair shake. Now, if you're a farmer and you have used a biological, you rate them very highly. So this is good news. You rate them poorly if you've never used them, but if you use them and you know how to use them, you rank them 7, 8, 9 above. So that's really good news, is once you learn how to use them, they rate them highly. And so what's the big problem again? Half of all growers around the globe, wherever you are, say, I don't use them because I don't know how to use them. I don't know enough about them. I don't know what they're going to do for me. I need more information. And the other half are happy. So how do we solve that? Well, there's a lot of detail that we need to educate the farmers about, and on the label and when to use them. Most biologicals are preventative. They're not curative. So therefore, you have to use them early in the season, especially for disease control, preventive measures. And so all these different effects of what are the effects on pollinators, and what can you tank mix it with how much water can you use, et cetera. So for example, here's a study we did at Marrone Bio with Grandivo, which is a new species of bacteria, Chromobacterium subsugi, that's insecticidal, nematicidal. And what this shows you is that the lower the bar, the higher the efficacy. These are different adjuvants that the farmers added to the tank to stick the product to the, like, rain fastness or a sticker or something to make it spread on the plant. And you can see how some of the products that the farmer were using and mixed in the tank inactivated the biological. It was no longer active. So those are the bars in the middle where they're higher, which means the LC50 is higher and it wasn't working. So what they put and mix together is really important to determine. Also, here's a study we did on the different formulations of Grandivo. Grandivo degraded in sunlight in 2 hours. Well, that was not a great product. And so formulation 1 has no sunscreen in the formulation. And it's not very good. It doesn't separate from the untreated. Formulation 4 is the latest one the company has, which has a better granule formulation with sunscreens in it. And it works just about, it's not statistically different than the best commercial insecticide. So formulation can make or break your product. Water. Here's another one where, sorry, this is not in metric units, terrible. We're still in the dark ages in the United States. This is showing you that the more water you use, the worse the product performs. So sometimes farmers use way too much water. And what happens with biologicals is that it dilutes the mode of action, especially since a lot of biologicals are preventative and need a high enough dose or are anti-feedant, and you need enough of that dose on the leaf. So the lowest amount of water gave even better control than the chemical in this study against mites. So my message is, it's not, do biologicals work? Yes, there is skepticism about them, but it's not, do they work? It's how to make them work, how to integrate them into the program. Look at the season-long benefit. So it's not just about counting bugs or the number of leaf spots, because sometimes you'll see more pests or leaf spots, but the marketable yield at the end of the season is as good or better than the chemical pesticide. It's because the biologicals are doing something differently. They're giving a higher plant health, better soil health, higher plant health. So it's not, the old ways of measuring it, like chemicals, are just not adequate for biologicals, okay? So it's really important to understand that and to look at what the grower measures, which is marketable yield, not just percent control or the number of spots or bugs. So why would I start up again at my age? Oh, my goodness. Well, we have big problems to solve, okay? My company has taken my previous chief science officer, my previous president from Marrone Bio, and started up again. And we have a unique expertise, and because there are big problems to solve. So another thing, though, as an entrepreneur, is that every company that I build, we have an idea of how you treat people, what kind of people you want in the company, and the kind of culture you want to build. And when new people come in, and new investors and board members, and it changes, and sometimes you don't even recognize that culture. So every time I do it, we get closer and closer to where we want to have the basic core values and the culture that we desire. And so it always makes it to try again, anyway. And in the case of invasive species, the United Nations came out with a report, the IPBES report, which said that not only have trillions of dollars in damage happened because of invasive species, but every year it's close to $500 billion worth of damage. And we don't do a good job of controlling them. I think these invasive species are a perfect target for microbes, because my shrimp project and many others, and the mussel product, show that you can find a microorganism to do just about anything. So we can target quickly now, with all the tools we have, target any invasive species or pest and quickly find a solution. So there's lots to do. And so from farm to fork, you know, I think I'm glad to see some companies here, and I think it's a great time to start up a company, or be an entrepreneur, or join a company, or spin out if you're a researcher, and spin out your technology to a startup or to a company, because, as I said, there are big problems to solve. Thank you.